Nurse.org and Major League Sports teams are honoring nurses with discounted game tickets and once-in-a-lifetime experiences. From throwing the first pitch to riding the Zamboni to on-court recognition, join the fun. Visit nurse.org/nurse night to find a nurse appreciation event near you and grab your discounted tickets today. You're listening to Nurse Converse, presented by Nurse.org, a collaborative podcast amplifying diverse nurse voices. Get ready for a dose of inspiration, a sprinkle of education, and a whole lot of community.
Hey there, sister.
Hey, friend. How's it going?
Living the dream every day. I mean, it's hard to believe that we're still talking about RaDonda Vaught's case.
Oh my God, we're still talking about RaDonda Vaught's case?
We are still talking about this situation.
Why are we still talking about this case, Maggie?
Well,
it was
interesting.
So long ago.
It was a hot minute ago. I mean, how many years are we in now?
December 26, 2017 was the date of the event. So we're
a hot minute in.
7 years in now.
But I don't think that a lot of people know that it was just back into the media again. I don't think that a lot of people fully understand.
We'll talk about the Board of Nursing, specifically that case. We're not really going to get into the criminal aspect of it, but we're going to talk about the Board of Nursing case. The reason, because it's still ongoing. It's still ongoing. We've gone through some appeals and, we'll talk about why, but ultimately, this isn't about getting a license back. I think first and foremost, that needs to be said. This is about, let's establish some ground rules for how boards of nursing operate and how they go about investigating nurses. That's the real big issue here. And there really isn't, and Maggie can attest to that, there really isn't. By the way, y'all, hey, I'm RaDonda Vaught. We're still talking about my case.
I am Advocate Maggie. And just like she said, we're not talking about anything else besides the Board of Nursing. Something that, again, the reason why we've come together is because this is so near and dear to my heart. And what she says, some of the stuff that she goes through is the stuff that I talk about almost every day with nurses. All my career has been primarily in a hospital setting, ICU, ER, pre-op, PACU, endo, IR, cath lab. I did spend time at a board of nursing. I was a civil expert, an administrative expert. And so the bulk of what I do now to date is just educating nurses, helping lawyers when nurses are under investigation. And so that's what, I'll let RaDonda introduce herself, and it's going to become no mystery how we cross paths.
I mean, I don't remember exactly when it was that we actually first connected. I want to say it was probably shortly after my criminal trial.
Yeah.
I know. So that would have been 2022 sometime.
Yeah.
Before I became a felon, I was a nurse. I got a bachelor's of science in nursing from Western Kentucky University and a certificate in leadership, and graduated in 2014, got licensed in 2015. My husband and I live in Middle Tennessee, about an hour north of Nashville, on a farm. And, my life goal was never actually to be a nurse from a child. But once I did engage in that path, I started working at Vanderbilt within about 9 months of becoming licensed, fell in love with it, stopped the DNP program that I was in because I loved it so much, being in the neuro ICU. And I wanted to stay there. And the DNP program that I was in only offered family nurse practitioner. And I realized that I had a real passion for being in the hospital, but more so I had a real passion for being with the patients. And so I thought, I'm staying here, until I feel like I am ready to move on with my career. But I loved it so much. So I was about 3 years into my licensure when this medication error happened.
And that's the other reason why I think it's imperative for us to be talking about this, because the stuff that you get subjected to literally falls under 3 different types of law.
What are those 3 types of law?
Oh, RaDonda, thank you for asking. That would be administrative, that would be civil, and that would be criminal. So those are the basics. Now there's some nuances within there, but essentially when you're a nurse, those are the 3 types of law that you could be held accountable under just by merely holding a professional license. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that there is, number one, knowledge gap. You don't,
Absolutely.
ditto, me as well.
I had no idea.
None, none,
No idea.
none, none. When you get
So let's
handed that
talk about those
license,
3 areas. Here's what they are, and most lay people don't even understand this. Just from my perspective, let's give them examples. So I'm a licensed nurse. My nursing license is regulated under administrative law, and that looks different in every state, but most states have a board of nursing or some administrative cohort of people like that. And their sole job is to regulate licensures of health professionals, i.e., all of the other things. And then you have civil. So in my case, that would have been, if the family were to have sued me, for monetary damages. So civil is an individual citizen suing another individual citizen for monetary damages. Administrative is regulating any sort of professional licensure, whether that's nursing, a facility, whatever it may be. If you hold a license, there's an administrative body that governs that and a set of laws, the Administrative Procedure Act, that regulates that. Then criminal. So criminal is actually, a crime. Each state has an annotated code of law that describes at varying levels what crimes look like. This is what a crime is. This is how it's described, for legal professional reasons. And, criminal law is investigated by state bureaus of investigations, local law enforcement, sheriff's departments, district attorneys, police, etc. If you are found to be potentially guilty, then they will indict you and charge you, and then you will go through the process of proving whether you are innocent or guilty, of said accused crime. So that's where we are. There's 3 very different things, and those don't necessarily overlap. I mean, there can be some overlap there, but I guess I say that to say there's no call for them to work together the way we think about that in healthcare. We think about in healthcare there's
no, we don't.
interdisciplinary and we're all a team, right? That is absolutely not how things work in the eyes of the law, really in any capacity of law. So,
When does a nurse realize that? When does that fruition come?
when it is way too late. When it is
And I don't laugh.
absolutely
I don't. It's
too
just,
late.
that's every single day.
Do you get a call every business day from a
Oh,
new
or
person?
an email or a direct message or a
Yeah.
comment, or there is no shortage of this. Yes,
Yeah.
oftentimes related around the stuff for nurses, 90%, I believe this is like the ANA attorney was talking about this. And something, again, I always say I'm not the end all to be all, especially when it comes to statistics, but a nurse is 90% more likely to stand in front of administrative law, a board of
Correct.
nursing, than civilly or criminally. Now, like
Well,
RaDonda
because
said,
that's the first avenue,
yes,
right?
and we're low
That's
hanging
the
fruit for
Well, and
nurses,
that's the
for an
job.
RN, for an RN.
Yeah.
So a nurse practitioner that may, or a nurse anesthetist, or
Mhm.
someone who is a licensed independent practitioner, their numbers may go up. They could lead to causation, right? The causing, where oftentimes it's not solely based on the nurse, and that gets in a lot of nuances. And I'm speaking a little bit out of turn there, but you're more
So
likely to
nurses are
stand
gonna wind up in front of the board of nursing, most likely, and the reason is because you are a licensed professional. You have a standard set of rules, whatever that looks like in your state, that you are supposed to abide by, your standards of practice, whatever that's called in your state. The ANA sets that, and at the state level, there are certain things, every state is different. Every administrative body in every state is different, but ultimately they have one job, and that is to protect the public from unsafe nursing practice. And so when unsafe nursing practice is recognized and reported, you're going to stand in front of the board of nursing. That's why nurses are 90% more likely to stand in front of, an administrative body than any other body. Also, quick fact, when we think about adverse events in a hospital, what causes patient harm? Almost half of those, and I heard Rita Jew from ISMP talk about this multiple times, but almost half of the adverse events that occur in hospitals to patients are medication related events.
I believe it.
Who's pushing those medications, Maggie?
Nurses.
Nurses. So of half of the events in hospitals that harm or potentially harm patients are going to happen with a nurse directly involved with the medication administration. There you go. That's a direct route
Yeah.
to your board of nursing.
And if it leads to a sentinel event, some of the things that I didn't even realize until I was at the board of nursing, there are certain things that do have to be reported. So in my state of Texas, for example, and then pivoting on again, what you're saying, that every state is different. There are rules or regulations. Texas says if it's 5 minor instances or a major instance, and those, a sentinel event would be considered, a major instance that would happen, that's mandatory reporting. So more than 5 minor instances. So what you would consider a trend in behavior and a major instance, or some states may even say like a termination of a nurse. There is oftentimes criteria because now if you're a chief nursing officer, I have different roles as well. I don't have a choice. Now I do
Well,
have
I can tell you in my case, right, that's what happened. So this was a major event, a sentinel event. And
So is that
that's
what
exactly what
generates
happened.
your
Right.
complaint initially?
Correct. That was. So when this event happened on December 26, 2017, and the very next time that I was back at Vanderbilt was on January 3rd of 2018. And that's when I was terminated. So I was issued a copy of, this termination letter. And I was told by the A&O that this would be sent over to the Board of Nursing in the state of Tennessee. And that would serve as essentially notification of a complaint to them for. And interestingly enough, the way that it was worded, it didn't say anything about it being a sentinel event. What it did say was that a serious safety event occurred, said nothing about the death of a patient or the outcome of the patient. To quote the A&O who gave me the letter, she stated it was written in a very benign way, benign being the word that she used. It was, but it also stated that I failed to follow medication administration policy, and that was the reason I was being terminated without eligibility for rehire. So that was sent to the Board of Nursing. I was told it would be sent to the Board of Nursing, and I was told that it would be several months before I heard anything. And I was told, go find another job. You can keep working. No, nothing to see here. Wait till they contact you. And that's kind of how that. That's how that initially played out. I just waited to be contacted.
So as a prior investigator, that would have landed on my desk. I would have opened up their file and I would have seen what they were saying. And then that's when I, as the investigator, would have generated on or about this date, this time, you gave a medication that caused, and I would just quote, a serious safety outcome. I'm going to need your response within 30 days. Here is some basic information I need back from you, your resume, stuff around the event. There's a questionnaire. Then the next letter, that would be to you, sent certified mail. I would be reaching out to the CNO from the organization, telling him or her that I was going to have to reach out to medical records to obtain the records of said individual involved in this, that I would be asking for your employee file. I'd be asking for the policy for medication administration, and then any evidence-based science, because the investigator should be a nurse who should be looking at the case. Now, for myself, I worked in the ICU, so then I understand some things as it pertains to medication. But if not, one of the things that they should be doing is reaching out to expert. But the other reason why we are here is because I too have concerns about the way that things are handled. And I don't want to get the cart before the horse, but just so people understand. So the next thing that you would have gotten in the mail, and then, kind of speak to this, would have been a letter from, or oftentimes, again, to your point as well, every state is different. Depending on the evidence that's sent would be dictate whether that would be a call or an email versus a letter. Once the letter is sent, those are considered oftentimes allegations, and you have to give a response. You are fully under investigation, outside of where some states will call, try to get some basic information before.
That's what happened in Tennessee.
Hey, nurses, looking for exclusive discounts? Nurse.org has you covered with deals on everything. Save big on the essentials you need to excel in your career. Don't miss out. Visit nurse.org/discounts for the latest discounts made just for you.
Okay.
So there was nothing officially sent, no allegations. It was actually 8 months after I was terminated before I ever heard anything. So an 8-month period as a nurse, I did it took me 6 months. I finally went back to work. I didn't know how long this was going to take, so I just waited to hear from them. And it was a phone call, maybe a phone call and an email asking me to come in for an interview with a nurse investigator from the Tennessee Department of Health. So in the state of Tennessee, the Board of Nursing falls under the Tennessee Department of Health. In
Very.
different states,
Yep.
I don't know how that works. I just know from state to state I've learned that it is different. So I get a call from this investigator. She asks me to come in. I come in. We
By
sit down in a
yourself?
room.
By yourself?
Hmm?
By yourself?
Yeah, by myself. I came in by myself. I didn't even think about getting an attorney. I didn't think I needed one. I don't know. I was extremely naive, Maggie. Extremely
This is
naive.
everyone. This is all of us. This is the majority of people I talk to. And
Yeah,
even when I was an investigator, the majority of nurses would, respond or reach back out, where a physician will lawyer up. Not a chance. Do I know this
right.
100%? I
Why do
don't.
we? Why do they lawyer up? Because they realize that they have something to protect. And
Yes.
I can say this in hindsight now. My advice to anyone is know your rights. Number one, you don't have to speak to anyone. You should first and foremost protect your rights and your license. And your refusal to speak to someone does not mean that you are guilty.
It's
It
not
does
that
not
you're
mean that you are
refusing.
innocent.
You're not.
It means that you are educated and you know how to protect your rights. That's it.
You're
That's it.
waiting to have your legal counsel respond to them. You're not refusing to speak to them. But your
Right.
next question is, am I allowed legal counsel? You absolutely are. And
Hey, Maggie, I have a question. When you have a specialty issue inside the hospital, are you going to continue to see the hospitalist?
oh,
Are they going to call in a specialist?
yes.
Right. So now this is a nurse moving outside of their specialty practice in healthcare as a nurse. You're being interviewed by a legal administrative system. You need someone who speaks that language.
Say
You
that
don't speak
again.
that
I
language.
don't think that people understand that.
So we're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about, what this whole process was like going through the Board of Nursing. We're going to go through the documentation along the way from, January 3rd, 2018, all the way to the most current, which I think was it February? February that I went back before the Tennessee Court of Appeals. So there's years of things to talk about, but we're going to sum it up in a way that better prepares
Digestible.
you. Right.
Digestible.
You need to understand as a nurse, this isn't about, again, this is not about the mistake. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to talk about the criminal charges. We're going to talk about what I learned along the way and how this affected my license. And not only how this affected my license, but how this is going to affect your license. This isn't about me. My goal is never to get my license back. My goal is to have some accountability across the board. Nurses are going to be accountable for their actions. Hospitals are going to be accountable for their actions. State boards of nursing, or whoever that administrative body is, who is supposed to protect the public and regulate nursing licensure, they also need to be held accountable for doing that, because that did not happen. That did not happen. Let me repeat myself. That did not happen the first time around. The state of Tennessee, the Department of Health, the Board of Nursing, the Office of Investigations, they had an obligation to public safety that they did not meet because they
Duty.
failed to do anything to my license. They
And
swept it under the
what
rug.
was the
They
difference in the evidence the first time to the second time?
What was the difference in the evidence?
Nothing, right?
From me, nothing.
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 We're not here to talk about the case. We're here to talk about the nuances, because it's all falls under the lack of what I now know to be due process, not extended to nurses when they're under investigation. Because
Mhm.
like we're done the first time around, Why you should have been disciplined the first time around. They should have
Absolutely,
never
I should have
gone to
been.
criminal. Yes, the family should have been, written a check. That should have been handled civilly the way it's supposed to, but never criminally. And to your point, what happened from the first time to the second time is just mind blowing to me
Mhm.
because there's no new evidence.
No new
There's
evidence.
absolutely no new evidence. So
Right.
are
Because they're
there
not looking, the board of nursing is not looking at anyone else except for me
correct?
and my nursing
Yes.
practice. That's it. So when they ultimately charge me with unprofessional conduct, abandoning a patient, and failure to maintain a record, i.e., I did not document what I gave, they were all aware.
The
They
first
were
time.
aware of all of that. We had a 2-hour recorded conversation. They were aware of those things. Why didn't you take any action the first time? You absolutely should have. And I say you, they absolutely should have. I was shocked that they didn't do anything, fully expecting, I told my nurse educator the day this happened, of among other things, one of the things that I said was, I'm going to lose my license. I said, I could have killed this patient. She hadn't passed yet. I could have just killed this patient. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my license. I'm going to go to jail. I was fully prepared to not to lose my license or to have some sort of action taken against it. At minimum, maybe you go back and look over med safety, medication administration, pharmacology, something,
Education,
maybe an
common,
evaluation of me as a nurse to see, are
fit to
mentally,
practice.
are you fit to practice? Yeah, you killed a patient. Let's check in here and make sure that you are mentally appropriate to step back into this role in patient care. Because our job as the Board of Nursing is not to protect nurses, it's to protect the public. They will inherently side with the public because that's their job. Their job is to make sure that nurses are practicing safely and that when there is a complaint, it is handled and the nurse is reprimanded appropriately because their job is to protect the public. So you think that you would go before a jury of your peers, a bunch of nurses, and just talk candidly with them and explain what happened. But that's not going to be the case because their job isn't to empathize or sympathize with you as a nurse. Their job is to protect the public.
And a lot of these
Period.
nuances we're gonna, like you said, we're gonna be talking about over the next, series. But this is the lack, I think, of knowledge for all nurses. Even myself,
Mhm.
I did not have a mere fraction of this, just like you didn't, until, you know, my path is being different. But I was just, I was shocked. So my first crossover is as an investigator. My second crossover is the civil cases where due process happens. I'm like,
Mhm.
wait a second here.
Hey, Maggie,
Wait a second. What
what's due
happened?
process? Let's
Well,
talk about
let's do
that
it.
because I think there's a lot of assumptions here. We watch criminal television, right? We don't usually watch civil law. No one's watching court TV.
Sure.
We think of law, we
Law
think
and
of
order.
criminal law,
Yeah.
law and order, whatever those other things are. I
No,
don't
no,
know.
no, no,
But
no.
dun 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 dun
Probably not supposed to be
dun.
plugging this. We might have to get this out. We know it's supposed to be in, but we might
We're
have to
sorry.
disclose this on the on the post worksheet.
But But that's what we think of,
Yes,
right? We're not legal professionals. So
correct.
we are lay people in terms of the law and our understanding of that. So due process is kind of that assumption that we as lay people in terms of the law, when I say we, I mean nurses, we think about due process as, well, it's you are given the opportunity to prove your innocence and that there's a checklist of things along the way, same as admitting a patient when you come into the emergency department, right?
I too
You
thought
admit
that.
them,
I too
assess
had that
them,
very illusion
make a
when I.
plan,
Mm-mm.
but that isn't the case. That there is no, and maybe in criminal law there is an expectation of that, but we as nurses, lay people to the legal system, have this belief that this is what we see, that you're going to get a chance to prove yourself.
And
And
is
you're
this
not
true
going to
in
be
every single
charged
state?
multiple times, right, with the same thing. We're not going to go
That's
back
the
over
other
and over
thing.
again and investigate you. But those things do not apply in other areas of the law. And when I say other areas of law, I'm specifically talking about the Administrative Procedures Act, which governs whatever administrative body that is responsible for your nursing license. Those things don't apply there.
On double
And so,
jeopardy, you
mhm,
can be charged in more than one state. So let's just
correct,
say you get disciplined in Nevada and you do hold a Texas license, you can be real sure you will be investigated. Now, Texas will look at the conduct and decide you will be if you will be disciplined or not, but you sure can be, even if your license is expired. So when you talk about due process, those are some of the things that the nuances I don't think that nurses realize that
right,
or you're not going to be given your full and complete file. You that letter that I talked about, if it got to the allegation point with that letter, that could have been 2 years ago. That could have been
mhm,
15 years ago because there's no statute of limitations for a board of
correct,
nursing complaint. So now they're asking you to respond within 30 days to, two initials because you're not going to get HIPAA information, some
correct,
numbers while you worked at this job that was maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago. You know how many jobs I've had? Are you joking me? And they're like, give me your response within 30 days. Now,
right,
you may remember the event, right? Okay, let's just say it was something, very someone coded, you know what I mean? Like yours, you may have some memories, but I even was trained at national training that, and this is a common sense argument. Every second you're away from the event,
mhm,
you start to lose memories. Then you say it so
absolutely.
many times. Now you're interjecting stuff that you heard someone else say. This is all stuff that's out there as fact. So do you really have an independent knowledge and you're asked within 30 days? Is that due process?
No,
Mm-mm. No, my
no.
friends.
I think it's important that they understand that, we as nurses understand there's several things about administrative law that's different. You are 90% more likely you're going to stand in front of a board of nursing. You will not be given that due process. You will not be handed a packet of information wrapped up in a nice bundle for you to review. You can be investigated more than one time. Investigated, closed, open right back up, same exact event, and now charged with administrative, law code and have your license disciplined or revoked. And there is no time limit on this. I mean, I've
Who
talked to people who have
who are
been
you gonna
reported
tell?
years later.
Who will you tell?
Who are you going to tell? Nobody. In the Tennessee, the state governor appoints someone over the board of nursing. I don't know what that position is, maybe a chair or something ahead of board of nursing. But then you have people with, there's more than one person. So you have this one person at the top, they're just appointed.
I was
The
shocked
governor
when I
doesn't
learned this. I
they
was
don't go back and
shocked.
overview. Well, this is what happened actually. So the second time I was called in, I asked them, "Hey, you guys just sent me this letter in the mail stating you concluded your first investigation. I'm confused about why you're asking me, to come back and talk about this again." And investigator just says, you know, take that up with the general counsel, the attorney for the Office of Investigations. I don't know. I just got this packet of information and was told to call and ask you some questions.
And what do you
Called the
have to do?
attorney, heard nothing back. There is no one. There you can complain. If I said I complain about you, Maggie, I could go to your boss. So you don't have one. It's just you. It's just Maggie. So I complained to Maggie, and guess who comes back with a resolution? Guess who looks at it? Guess who investigates that complaint? It all happens right
And
there.
people think that we're crazy, you know this, right? Your case just went through the Supreme Court again. And then the other thing is that I went to my representatives in the state of Texas
Mhm.
and I said, the Public Health Committee to be specific, and I said, who would you like to call? Call the governor. All those people they said sitting there with their jaw dropped. I'm like, yeah, now do your job. Do your job. Do your
Right?
job.
Yeah, because there isn't. And again, this it
I wish
seems
this was hyperbole. I wish this was hyperbole, but
maybe you and me both.
I'm pursuing
You
law
and me
school at
both.
51. Why we're here, why we're
Mhm.
still talking about this 7
Why
years
I'm
later.
still going through this appeal process when my license was revoked in 2021. Why are we still working on this? We're working on this because the system has to improve. right? The system has to improve. The point is the Board of Nursing has a responsibility, but there's no one there to oversee what they're doing. And that's not fair or safe.
Anything else before as we wind it up? And we'll be seeing you in the next couple episodes. I'm so honored again to be here with you and to help advocate and educate our people. Thank you for hopping on and us doing this. I'm
just a big shout out to Nurse.org. I really appreciate them seeing that there is an important thing to talk about here and just giving me an opportunity to put this information in front of nurses, because I genuinely do care. This isn't self-serving. I've got nothing to gain from this. I'm well aware that I'll never get a license back, but I have a lot of knowledge and experience that I want to share with my profession because I love and care deeply about it. And I also love and care deeply about the patients that we cared for. So there's a bigger reason here. And, thanks for giving me the opportunity. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next couple episodes.
Thanks for joining Nurse Converse, brought to you by Nurse.org. Help us grow by leaving a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Nurse.org supports nurses with career and education tips, life advice, and breaking news. Thank you for all you do and for being you.